Hey everybody, Brandon here. Welcome back to another video. We're going to be covering another tournament game. I'm playing with the black pieces. This is my third game in my return to over the board tournament chess, and it's exciting. Actually, it's really exciting because it's been like 3 years since I last played a tournament, so I'm really trying my best here. So I have drawn a game that I totally should have lost against someone who's 2700 bullet. And then I beat someone who had a 2000 FIDE rating, but only a 1700 national rating. So, of course, it was nice to win that game. Lots of FIDE points and, of course, getting some national points as well. And now we are playing against a whale, and I'm playing with the black pieces. Let's get started. So, e4, c5, knight c3. I just play knight c6. Generally, what I've noticed in these close Sicilian setups is to go for this g6 move, especially when the knight's on c3. One of the big reasons is because you don't want to actually fianchetto. If they're avoiding d4, you don't want to fianchetto when they play c3 d4, because in the Alpine structures, having a bishop on g7 isn't really the thing you want to have. So that's just one thing to mention. But they, of course, don't have that in this position, so I go for my dragon setup. Castles, rook e1 and rook b8. Going for b5, b4. That's generally what you do in these positions. It's kind of like opposite sides. Not castling, but it's like a reversed King's Indian almost. Instead of going for a kingside attack for us, we go for a queenside attack, and they go for a kingside attack, which is funny because we're the one with the fianchetto. But yeah, so rook b1, a6. I don't play b5 immediately. One reason why actually is because I didn't want to allow any d4 stuff with taking the b5 pawn here. So a6 was just a way to say, hey, I'm gonna be playing b5, and the rook is generally, as far as I'm concerned, better on the b file anyways, because it also avoids any problems on the long diagonal with the knight hanging and the rook in the corner. So my opponent played bishop e3, b5, h3, bishop b7, knight to d5, and I didn't take. If I took on d5 here, one of my biggest concerns is that the e7 pawn is a bit weaker. And if I play like knight a7, yeah, they play probably something like c4, and before I actually just lose a pawn, by the way, because I can't take back. And I wasn't really sure what was going on here. I didn't even think about it for more than half a second. I kind of blitzed out my move, and I played e6. And that's actually going to be something that I should mention for the next, like, this is game 65 of my career, like my tournament career. And I'd say up until like game 100, 105 or something like that. I have about 120 games now. As of recording this, it's middle of October. But up until like, yeah, game 100 or 105 or something, I consistently rushed my games and didn't think on my time. I was just playing quick moves, and it was a very stupid habit. But I like to think I broke it, but yeah, you never know. It could come back. As of this recording, past few tournaments I've had, time management has been pretty good. But okay, so I played e6, takes, bishop takes, c3, bishop g7, and I was expecting d4, honestly. And I was thinking, uh-oh, that's not good. Because, again, when you see these types of Alpine positions, that's what happens when c3 happens. You get an Alpine. I just got into a bad version of an Alpine where my bishop's on g7. So I was a little unhappy. But then I was pretty happy to see knight h2, because now they're not all of a sudden going for d4. So I played rook c8, thinking like, okay, yeah, maybe they play knight h2 because they want to pretend to threaten f4, even though I knew that their biggest idea was still d4 here. So I was, of course, preparing for the c file to open. Queen d2, knight e7. I notice now that they're trying to go for bishop h6 and knight g4, which is something I really should avoid. So knight e7 is a way to do that. And I had a funny idea. Bishop h6. Right now, their threat is knight g4. And of course, I didn't really want to play knight g4 before, like here. It just felt a little off with some sort of f4, f5. The h pawn feels really misplaced, and it wishes it was back on h7 here. So this knight e7 is kind of like a funny maneuver to not have to play h5. So bishop h6, king h8. Why does this matter? So if knight g4 here, now I can play knight g8. That's the whole idea. It's just like removing myself from that square just to bring the knight back, and then if they do something, then maybe I can just play like knight f6. Like if they move the bishop back, I mean, then I can just play like knight f6, maybe like d5 or something, and I don't see any problems. But yeah, bishop takes g7 check, king takes, knight g4, knight g8, knight back to h2, and now h5. And now I'm a lot less concerned with something like f4, f5, because they don't have the dark squared bishop, and maybe that was a wrong assessment, but also f4. I was thinking maybe some sort of queen h4. I don't think it does anything currently, but the fact that I can kind of probe into the position a bit more and a bit easier kind of meant to me that h5 was a bit of a move that I can, or a move that I can throw in a little bit more nicely. So bishop f3, queen to e7, rook b to d1, again, in my assumption, going for d4, rook f d8, queen e2, d5, takes, and rook takes. My opponent played knight to f3, rook c to d8, trying to go for the d pawn, and then they played d4, and I was thinking like, wait, what did I? Yeah, they can play d4. Because for some reason I thought I had like some sort of e5 here, but I just don't. Takes. I tried queen d6. So yeah, here, I have nothing, I just played queen d6, trying to take advantage of the pin. You know, if they play like knight c2, then I can take on d1, win a rook. They just play rook c1, so nothing comes of it. I played knight f6. They play rook c2, and I play rook c8. Of course, I'm not threatening rook takes d4 yet, but I want to pretend it's in the cards. They just play rook d2 though. I play rook d8. They play rook c2, and then I play queen f4. Of course, I'm still trying to keep the game going. That's kind of my style. I want to keep trying to allow things and just see what happens. So there's a funny idea here. I don't know if my opponent saw it, but I provoked queen takes e6. Queen takes e6 looks like it's a move, but it loses. Obviously, we should mention that if pawn takes, there's knight takes e6, king f7 takes. We're dead lost. We just lost 2 pawns for absolutely nothing. But of course, after queen takes e6, we just counter desperado. Queen takes d4. And let's just say that the thing we took was more valuable than the thing that they did. So we would be winning here. So that would be a nice counter punch. But of course, my opponent didn't fall for it. They played queen e3. I took going for an endgame because I realized my rooks are just more active, so I can just kind of make them sad forever and ever and ever, which was nice. g5 here. And now I just want to play king g6. Slight improvements. A lot of people, when they see endgames like this, where it's just double rooks and knight versus knight, or, it's a minor piece endgame, they don't really know exactly what to do and how to improve their position. But the truth is, you look for small improvements. I think that's the most important thing that people forget. If you just look for something small, but something that makes your opponent's life just a little bit more annoying to deal with, then you did your job in these types of endings. And that's what g5 does. It's nothing special. It just gains slightly more space. And I can play king g6. That's the definition of nothing special. But at the same time, I'm trying to improve a piece. My piece on g7. Because now I want to actually put it into the game and make it control a little bit more squares, since the risk of checkmate is reduced. Not impossible, just reduced. So we see rook c to e2, rook 8 to d6 to prevent any rook takes e6 problems, rook e5, knight to d7, saying, hey, if you want to trade on d5, fine by me. They do that. King f1, king f6, and as we can see here again, my king is slightly more active than theirs. Our rooks are about the same, and knights are, maybe their knights even slightly better. I would argue the same though. And here we see knight c2. I played knight c5. They played knight e3, and I played rook d7. So what they're going to try to do here is they're going to play some sort of king e1 and then rook d2. But of course, they shouldn't play king e1 first. They should play rook c2, king e2, and then go for rook d2. Let's just say if they go king e1 though, there would be this check, which just makes things still just annoying. Funny move here. Knight takes f2, check, just winning a pawn, which of course would be welcomed, but that would not be played. Instead, yeah, rook c2 was played, and the whole idea is king e2 and then rook d2. So I played a5, and this was just trying to welcome a move here that my opponent didn't play, which is c4. c4 looks like a natural move, but I thought that b4 was just significantly better for black, or just like better for black. And it turns out I was right, which was really nice to have. The whole idea is after a takes and a takes, say king e2, king e5, g3, and f5, and we're just going to play f4. And despite them having potentially in the future a protected pass pawn, our knight is so good, our rook is so good, and our king is so good. Whereas their rook is looking at the c pawn, this knight's dominated by the pawn. Their king is on the 2nd rank, while ours is on the 4th. For ours, obviously this is technically the 5th rank, but our 4th rank versus their 2nd rank, I would say that it's fair to say that we have an edge in everything except for maybe pawn structure. But the edges for everything else is just so significant that it doesn't matter. Okay, so instead king e2 was played, king e5. Again, I'm always welcoming c4. I'll just play b4. Rook d2. I took, and we got into this endgame where I play f5. Yeah, there's not really much to hope for here, but I really did my best to push, and it worked out, which is awesome. My opponent, I think, offered a draw around this point. I declined. Generally, in these types of positions, I like to play on, even if, well, not if I'm slightly worse. I'd say if I was white here, I'd probably accept the draw. But I really wanted to play on here, despite it arguably being pretty hard to convert. My opponent started with knight c2. I played knight b3 check, just seeing where they would go. King e2, and now f4. So after f4, the idea is if they play a move like knight d4, of course they can't, because my knight covers that square. Otherwise, if I move my knight back, then they play knight d4, b5 sanging, and I'm unhappy. But I was going to be unhappy in life anyways. So that's why I played f4 here. Just nothing crazy. f3, and then king d5. And I have a break in mind. I want to go e5, e4, takes. And again, my king's very active. It's majorities on opposite sides. So I think the winning chances are increased, which is really nice to say. My opponent played king d3. I played e5. They played knight e1, and now is my chance. Knight c5 check, king c2, e4, and now it's getting really, really difficult for them because, again, it's opposite side majorities. I traded off what was my backward pawn, essentially, for their pawn on f3, which was preventing the g4 break. Now g4 could come, followed by some sort of like f3, and that's very bad for them. They played b4. I played knight b7. The whole idea is I wanted to potentially play c4 and knight d6, and that would dominate their pawn structure, which funnily enough they allow. I think maybe they should have just considered taking, and that was their best chance, because after takes, and even maybe some sort of a4, the material is just so reduced that I can see this ending in a draw very, very quickly. So they play king d2 instead, allowing a4. Actually, I think now it's lost, though, after a4, or close enough to it. So they played knight f3, g4, takes, knight d4, and knight d6. So I'm going to go f3, consider sacking the pawn, win these pawns, win the game, go to sleep, because it's the third game of the day. My opponent played king e2, and I gotta say, I was very happy with this move. Maybe it's showboating, maybe it's not, but there's only one move to realistically make progress here, and it's not the most obvious one. So try to find it. Try to find it. I'll give you a little bit of time to pause if you'd like. So, arguably the most accurate move is g3, which looks extremely stupid, but the point is white's in Zugzwang. Either they have to move their knight, let's just say knight f3, which they did, but now knight c4 comes, and after knight d4, knight takes a3, they played king d2 and then resigned, because I just took a pawn, we got this position, and then now I can just go back with check, go back to d6, and the a pawn pushes here. And well, of course, this is losing now because I have a protected passed pawn, and I have passed pawns on both sides of the board, or potential to create a passed pawn on this side of the board. But I have a majority on this side of the board, and on the side of the board that they were better, they're now worse because I have a protected passer. Anyways, yeah, I have a protected passer there, which I've said enough times, so hopefully you get the point. And what other move did they make? King d2, they run into the same issue. Knight c4 check, king c2, knight takes a3 check, king b2, the only way to attack the knight, knight c4 check, and then I can go back, and of course this is definitely winning. If they go back with their king to the first rank, then that's where my king comes in finally. After this pawn's just immediately falling, so we can just end the variation there, honestly. So any other move, king f1 or king d1, same thing, just king d3, and it's game over. So yeah, that was really nice to be able to finish this game off with a win, even though it was pretty dry up till the very end, despite that e6 tactic, really, not really early on, but somewhere around here. Let me find it. Trying to provoke our opponents into taking on e6, which is sometimes you got to throw it in, see if they do it. That's an easy move to miss, but sorry, not like this is an easy move to miss, but like that's kind of why I played it, because it's believable that someone would miss it. But that's kind of why I wanted to show it, or hopefully have them play it, because queen takes d4, and then it's like an ambulance tactic, right? Like call an ambulance, but not for me. That's one of those cases. But yeah, a pretty dry opening, dry middle game, dry ending. Just got a slight edge. It was equal, and then they messed up. I think the most important part where they messed up. Clearly, they were defending here because they were just worse. But they had their chance. I think this was the last chance again. Is if they allow a4, it's just so weak after knight d6 c4, where they just have a weakness on a3 that I can attack forever. And again, king d2, a4. The b5 pawn's never really a weakness either, because when the knight goes to d6, it's covering the c4 break and covering b5, let alone threatening to go to c4. So yeah, I think this was the biggest mistake of the entire game. And of course, if takes was played, then it probably would have just ended in a draw here. So that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed. and I will see you guys in the 4th game of my first tournament back in tournament play. Have a good one. Bye.